Thank you for being here. It's a sheer pleasure to welcome you here, and I am delighted to introduce you to this here today. And allow me to say that remind that if this event didn't took place earlier, it is because it has been cancelled several times by a group, and we want to stress the fact that politics in Catalonia meant unfortunately the interpreter won't be able to interpret if you're not speaking a bit louder or in the mic. I'm so sorry, but it won't be possible. So why is this important? Well, let me sum it up in a few words. Because the relatives of victims have a right to the truth. We've talked about this over and over again, and this right has been enshrined in international law and national law. It is crystal clear the investigation which was held in Spain leads to many questions, huge questions actually, and things haven't been clarified yet, and doubts are still being there. The relatives of victims deserve some truth, deserve a proper investigation so that everything becomes clear. I do remember the 17th because I worked for the healthcare ministry in Catalonia back in the day. And on that afternoon of the 17th and the following days, I was there. I went to different hospitals, Sant Pau, Galmar, and also the hospital of Tarragona, because victims were also sent there. And who was there? Well, people who survived from these terrorist attacks. And some of the victims who survived on the first day, during the first hours, well, ended up dying because of their wounds. These hours have been very difficult. And personally, it has been difficult, but professionally speaking, I must say this has been one of the darkest hours as Minister of Healthcare. We tried to support the families, parents, relatives. I've had to accompany and support fathers, sons, mothers, sisters, while people were about to die. And I also had to support victims who had, well, for example, lost her husband. I remember this Canadian woman who survived although she lost her husband. And she was very thankful vis-à-vis our healthcare system, although she had just lost her husband. I will never ever forget all this suffering of these relatives. And this suffering of my friend, my dear friend Javier, is something I will never ever forget. And this right is also a duty. We have a duty of solidarity with the relatives of victims. And as a consequence, we need to support them in this quest for full and true justice. As a consequence, the right to the truth needs to be guaranteed. And this is what we would like to talk about with this roundtable. This is why we are here today, and that's why I'm deeply thankful vis-à-vis Jaume and Nico who are here. They are experts on international law and procedural law, and they will bring their tiny stone to this huge endeavor. I would like to thank the Asamblea, the Council as well, and Javier, obviously. Thank you ever so much for being here.
Bonsoir. Bonsoir à tout le monde.
Good evening to all of you. I'm Dolores Foliuk, chairwoman of the Catalan National Assembly, and I want to say that we are here because we are co-organizing this action with the Council of the Republic, and we want to organize this event here with Tony Comyn, because indeed we need an action together. And I think this is necessary because, as he has said, rightfully, we need to continue with this investigation, and we need to do all we can do so that truth becomes clear, and so that we can have real justice. And I will now do my speech in English.
Un peu les faits qu'il y avait et ce qui est passé. Et ça, c'est on the afternoon of 17th August 2017, 22 years old Yunus Abu Yaqub, a foreign-born who lived in the Catalan town of Ripoll since the age of 4, drove a van into pedestrian on the popular La Rambla in Barcelona, killing 13 people and injuring at least 130 others, one of whom died 10 days later. He fled the scene on foot and then killed another person to steal his car in his escape. He was killed by Catalan police in Subirats, a town 31 kilometers far from Barcelona, and the west of Barcelona, on August 21. One of his victims was a 3-year-old Catalan boy. His father and his old sister, they are here with us today, and I want to thank them very much for being here. 9 hours left after the Barcelona attack, 5 men thought to be from the same terrorist cell drove into pedestrian in nearby Cambrils, south of Barcelona, killing 1 woman and injuring 6 others. All 5 of those attackers were shot dead by Catalan police. Aside from the attackers, 16 people of 9 nationalities were killed, and more than 130 people were injured of over 34 nations, many critically. Those who were not physically injured in the attacks still today suffer from the psychological consequences, as well as their families. The night before the Barcelona assault, an explosion in a house in the Catalan town of Alcanar had destroyed the building and killed 2 members of the terrorist cell, perhaps including a 14-year-old imam, thought by the main responsible of the attack. Inside the house were more than 120 gas canciders, which police believe were going to be used to make a large bomb or 3 small ones, but were accidentally detonated. Former Spain's Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy called the attack in Barcelona a jihadist attack. But there's also a MAC news agency attribute indirect responsibility for the attack to the Islamic State. 4 men were arrested in connection with these attacks. 3 of them in their hometown, Ripoll. Another one who survived the explosion was arrested in Alcanar. They were charged by membership in terror organization and for murder, as well as possession of explosives. 2 of them were found guilty by the Audiencia Nacional in 2021, although being acquitted of terrorism homicide charge. In 2022, former Spanish Police Commissioner José Manuel Villarejo suggests in the Spanish High Court that the Spanish National Intelligence Service, who had the man as a confidant, was aware of the attacks. That the Spanish authority knew of Junts Abu Yaqub plans beforehand and use it to hamstring the Catalan independence movement. Consequently, the Catalan government called for an investigation into these scandalous accusations. However, the Bureau of the Spanish Congress refused to open a commission to investigate it, and the National Court refused to analyze whether the state was guilty of neglection. All these question marks related to the involvement or prior knowledge of the Spanish secret services have caused the proliferation of accusation and distrust. Indiscriminate terrorism is one of the worst scourges of our time, and it needs a way to be investigated. The Catalonia August 2027 attacks needs to be investigated. It's an affair of international relevance, given that most of the victims did not have Spanish nationality. We are today here to call for further investigations. The victims and the citizens have the right to know the truth. The not knowing prolongs the suffering of the families of the victims and causes insecurity and awareness among the population. A clarification is needed to provide some sort of reparation to the victims. The silence and lack of answers is unbearable. No false dialogue or negotiation between the governments of Catalonia and Spain can cover up the founded auspicions that Spain knew and did nothing to avoid a terrorist attack in Barcelona that summer of 2017. Refusing to investigate this indicates the seriousness of the situation and is in an abuse of fundamental rights. Catalonia is clearly experiencing a very complex time, especially regarding its political situation. But we cannot allow democracy and human rights deficiencies to impose a lack of clarification and investigation on such a grievous issue. Therefore, we call on the Spanish authorities to finally give this matter the consideration it deserves and perform a thorough and impartial investigation on all the unknowns like to the August 2017 attacks and disclose the truth once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Feliu. We will start with the first speaker, which will be Mr. Jaume Alonso-Cuevillas, who's a professor of procedural law at the University of Barcelona. He's the lawyer of victims of the August 17th attacks in Catalonia. He has been Dean of the Bar Association of Barcelona, President of the Council of Catalan Law, and President of the European Federation of the Bar Association. Apart from his academic and professional activities, Mr. Alonso-Cuevillas is a member of the Catalan Parliament for the party Junts, Together. Please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And I would like to thank the Assembly and the Assembly of the Republic for organizing this event. It is actually outrageous that the delegation of the government decided to cancel their participation in this event. This event has been organized a long time ago, over 2 months ago, and they should have been here. Hats off to you for organizing this event, and thank you again. This being said, let me remind you that in 2017, after the terrorist attacks, which we are talking about here, the former president in Catalonia called me to say, I want to introduce you to someone. And Javier Martinez was there, David Torres too, the father of a child who was 3 years old who was killed next to La Rambla. And Mozo de Escuadra from the criminal investigation team was there, and he supported Javier and myself on this case. I've been a lawyer for many years, but I want to say that this case, since the very beginning of me getting in touch with the clients, I've been feeling something very special. I've been deeply touched by all of this. And the father, Javier, told me that nothing would bring his son back, and that as a consequence he wasn't asking for anything. He just wanted the death of his child not to be useless. He wanted the truth, and as a consequence we tried to establish protocols so that something similar would never ever happen again. And this is why, I became very interested in this matter, in this case. I did not only want to win in court, no, I truly wanted to get to the truth. And I got in touch with Carlos, my colleague, who is here, and many others, and they have been a lawyer for many years. They knew the legal system in Catalonia very well, and the Spanish system as well, let's say it. And I asked Agustin to give me a helping hand. And I asked him to put himself in the shoes of a judge so that he would tell me what strings to pull in order to pave a way forward. And the thing is that we had to pull these strings to get to the truth and to pave a way forward. And so we have to recognize it. The investigation has been a huge failure, a total chaos. And so we went to court, and it was quite strange. And it was said that only the Alcanar elements would be studied, because what happened on La Rambla was caused by the people who had died. Same story for Cabril attacks, and as a consequence, no investigation would be possible, and this means, that suddenly well, the members of the commandos were considered as responsible for what had happened. And so we were facing parents, fathers, mothers, and they asked us, why do you want us to go there if we cannot truly seek justice? And so then things happened as they usually happen. Lawyers took the floor, they explained the situation, presented the facts, different elements, in order to seek truth. And during my intervention, I focused on putting forward everything that was in the files. I focused on all the elements, all the factuals which were listed in order to show what was clear and more specifically everything that was unclear. And then people started talking about national security, conspiracy, and many other things. Say again? Oh, that's Catalan. Okay, anyway. It is. It was actually quite clear. All the facts were there, and so we just wanted these facts to be presented to us, and if we had misunderstood anything, we would then apologize simply. And there were three key points, three major question marks, even though the first thing was actually quite clear. Indeed, the national secret services had a clear role and a clear responsibility because, as the President Dolores Feliu just explained, the jihadist had ties with the Chacal operation in 2006. He was very well known as a jihadist. He was put behind bars in Castellon, and secret services audited him several times. And documents are there, and national secret services from Spain followed also mobile communications of this guy. So it is quite unbelievable to imagine they were not able to avoid these terrorist attacks, because when a mobile phone is tapped into, well, there should be several flags which should be triggered by certain types of communications. And here, well, there has been a huge bloodshed, and this is unacceptable. It's for shame. What's more, there is a European regulation which is directly application in Spain since 2014, which means that all member states, including Spain, have to regulate effectively the sales of explosive precursors. And it is quite unbelievable to see that these people were able to purchase 150 liters of these substances very easily, because, well, it's thanks to these liters of oxygen peroxides they were able to produce bombs, and this is simply unbelievable. Therefore, we want the state to compensate the victims, as the state has a certain responsibility. What's more, we've been deeply worried by the fact that, as the chairwoman Feliu has said, that there has not been any investigation committee. Indeed, we've had such a massive terrorist attack and no investigation committee at all. In 2014, when there were terrorist attacks in Spain, an investigation committee was set up. So why such a difference? we started investigating the 40,000 documents, the 40,000 pages of documents in court, and this has been quite challenging because, well, these 40,000 pages were digitalized but on the cloud, and sometimes a few pages were missing, so we had to make do. And Professor Krisch will then talk about this issue later on, but the right to the truth is enshrined in international law. It is enshrined in UN's principles. And finally, who survived from this terrorist cell? According to the official statements, there were 3 people at the Alcala house. One survivor who was put behind bars, a second one who was ID'd, who was the brother of the terrorist who died in Capril. And the third one was the imam of the mosque. But all people who testified, many French actually, and a Belgian person as well. How do you say that in French? I'm losing my words. Okay, anyway. So, the French and Belgian people living around there, the neighbors actually, that's the word I was looking for, the neighbors, said there were 4 or 5 people living in that house, but police decided there were only 3 people, and actually an international house on international justice terrorism published a document saying that Abdallah Bezaki had died. And they thought there were only 3 people. And as a consequence, well, this third person was Abdallah Zaki. But the neighbors said they were used to seeing 4 or 5 people. And then we've also found a photography of someone who was older with a white barb, and the neighbors said they had recognized this person. And so we ask ourselves what happened with this person on the truck. The truck, after the first explosion, well, the neighbors said that a car, not a truck, that a car, a vehicle, was speeding in the area, lights off, that it was speeding away. This was after the first explosion. This truck appeared on the 21st, 4 days later in La Rabita, a few kilometers away, next to a land plot, and there were no fingerprints whatsoever in that truck. The truck had been cleaned. There was just a Coke can with some fingerprints, but no fingerprints elsewhere, not even on the door handles. This is why, or rather, this is the reason why we knew who the third person was, but actually there might be other people. What about this older person with a white barb? So the Mothos carried out quite an amazing work, but they did not find any cards nor any tools used. But this being said, they know that the phone from the Imam was used 3 or 4 days even after the attacks. A few calls of a few minutes were made, and so this means there were other people. What's more, the Imam had a mailbox. This is a system used by Secret Service to convey messages. Passwords are shared and logins are shared, and so you can put a message in a mailbox and then it can be consulted by another person who has the password and the login. And thanks to this, well, messages never ever go through the cloud. It remains more local, and this dead mailbox, as we call them in Catalan, was used even after the terrorist attacks. We also carried out DNA tests, and the police in Catalonia analyzed the situation, and a commission was sent to Morocco, and samples were taken from relatives of Santi, and Augusti could dig into details, but the national police indeed went to Morocco, and then Augusti asked, well, do you speak Arabic? And they said, no, not at all. And they also asked, do you speak French? No, at all. So what did you do? Well, we went there with that person from the embassy. And they shared some documents. And the samples from the relatives of Santi were sent to Madrid to compare, well, the samples. And quite surprisingly, months later, a document was sent to Madrid saying that samples had been compared and that indeed, well, these people were relatives. But from where did this document come from? Why were things done in such a way? We had denounced the problems, and the police acted in such a way. It is quite unbelievable. And we are supposed to believe such an email which was sent to Interpol. It is quite curious. And the Audiencia Nacional and the police of Catalonia and the police of Spain could compare things, and we wanted to know if El Sati had ties with El Chacal at terrorist attacks. It is quite unbelievable, because the databases in Spain didn't have any reference to the CODI system. Although things are what they are. Furthermore, we have found an earlobe, but we do not know to whom it belongs. And a comparison was made. And we know that the Imam had a jalaba size 52 and a jalaba size 56 was found. So this is a bit weird, but it makes us also think about, well, the irregularities with the soda can I talked about earlier in the car. Many weird things happening here. And so we got in touch with experts, and also the president from the International Academic for Legal Medicine. And we also contacted the former dean of the University of Girona, and all these people confirmed that all these irregularities in this case were disastrous. Here it looks like people were trying to compare apples with pears. And so the judge said they wouldn't accept things differently. Furthermore, there are even more question marks because the Ripoll cell from the 16th to the 17th was at the airport of El Prat. Between 2 and 4, he was at El Prat to welcome some relatives, but no one checked this, and the niece of the terrorist in Brussels in 2016 was there that night, and she had purchased plane tickets for 1 a.m. Plane tickets, one to Brussels and one to Milano at 10 a.m. And she went to Milano, she did not go to Brussels. So why wasn't there any investigation on these 2 plane tickets? It's quite weird, to say the least. So Spanish police said that, well, the corpse of El Sati had been found, and all the other terrorists requested the corpses, but here the corpse of El Sati was not requested. How come? Usually when people are religious, they tend to want to collect the corpse of their relatives. And here, every month, a bank transfer was made to pay for water, electricity, and other utility bills. The chairman of the Islamic community of Digem declared something that has been hidden quite a lot. He declared something unbelievable. Indeed, he said that when Issad wanted to be imam in Belgium, he tried speaking in Spanish on the phone, and then the imam said, "But why are you trying to speak in Spanish?" And he said, "Well, actually I'm speaking with secret services here in Spain. I could say many more things, but I feel so uncomfortable in French that I think I will stop there." All of this to say there are still many pending questions, many pending issues, many doubts, and obviously I haven't had the opportunity to dig into details, but all of this to say that indeed we need to seek the truth in Catalonia. And here I just put forward a few elements, and my report analyzed everything thoroughly, and you are most welcome to read it if you truly believe, as I do as a lawyer, that there is something quite unclear and unfair vis-à-vis these victims and their relatives. Well then, let's take action, because victims deserve, well, a right to the truth, and what's more, they deserve some respect which hasn't been granted until now. There are so many doubts, and we need a proper investigation, and the legal system in Spain needs to take action. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alonso-Cuevillas. Now we will go on to the next speaker, Mr. Nico Krisch. He's a legal scholar specializing in international law, constitutional theory, and global governance. He's professor at the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies in Geneva. Previously, he was research professor at the Catalan Institution for Research and Advanced Studies in Barcelona, the Institut Barcelona d'Estudis Internacionals, and the fellow at the Hertie School of Governance in Berlin. He has also been a professor of international law at the Hertie School, a senior lecturer at the Law Department of the London School of Economic and Political Science, and a research fellow at the Merton College at Oxford, New York University School of Law, and the Max Planck Institute of International Law in Heidelberg. He has also been a visiting professor of law at Harvard Law School. Please, thank you very much.
And especially kind of thank you to the Consejo para la República and the ANC for organizing this event, really, which came as a surprise and a disappointment, obviously, that it had been cancelled once and actually take part, because it is about a very, very grave affair, as we've already heard, and I'm not going to repeat what we've heard. I come to the issue as an academic international lawyer in the first place. I'm not involved in the proceedings of this case, but as I increasingly heard about those facts, I became much more interested in the legal frame in which these facts are embedded. So I've been trying kind of to work up a bit more about the broader legal aspects of this. I haven't done this alone, so I'm kind of happy for kind of private conversations with Agustí and Jaume and many others, also with an Argentinian colleague, Alejandro Chetman, and especially Néstor Bisco-Casals, who can't be here with us, who's also on the Consejo para la República and very involved in this case. So I come to it as an international lawyer in the first place, so I will talk about the international law aspects of the right to truth and how they apply to the facts of this particular case. Now, the right to truth in international law, it's been mentioned, sort of, it's increasingly recognized, but it's somewhat of a curiosity in international law because there's little written trace of it. So it's not mentioned in the international covenants on civil and political rights where you would expect it. It's not mentioned in many other documents, nor on the European Convention on Human Rights. It is mentioned in the UN Convention on Forced Disappearances, but that's really kind of the only kind of formulation of a binding nature. But it really has come about as the result of a struggle. And a struggle, especially in Latin America in the 1970s and 1980s, to deal with the crimes committed by dictatorships, especially around forced disappearances. And as a result of those civil society struggles, you can say kind of the right to truth, the right to knowing the truth for the victims and for society has become increasingly accepted. It was first formulated by the UN Human Rights Committee already in 1983 in a case concerning Uruguay, Quinteros versus Uruguay, in which the committee recognized that the lack of an investigation into a forced disappearance could cause torture or inhumane treatment for the relatives that were left in ignorance about what had happened to their close. And that was really kind of the starting point of a development that then took on, especially through the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and then the Inter-American Court of Human Rights that established the right to truth much more directly. Kind of now we have many statements also in international organizations, in the UN General Assembly since 2006, in the UN Human Rights Council since 2008. There's a UN Special Rapporteur on Truth, Justice and Reparations appointed by the UN Human Rights Council since 2011. And there's been a very influential study by the Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights in 2006, which is often taken as a reference point, even if it is not formally binding. Now, the particularity of the right to truth is that it's not often or not necessarily considered as a freestanding right, but really a right that is connected to a host of other rights that are formally acknowledged in international documents, conventions. There's especially the freedom from torture or inhumane treatment, I've mentioned that, the right to life and the positive obligations that flow for states from the protection of the right to life, the right to a judicial remedy, which in the eyes of different bodies kind of involves that there has to be an inquiry into violations of human rights in order to find out what has really happened. And more generally, and that's especially kind of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, has taken it as an obligation from the general commitment of states to ensure the respect for human rights, the human rights that are recognized in international agreements. Now, this means kind of this right has been at the international level, has been kind of widely developed, kind of is now kind of very widely accepted. The Convention on Forced Disappearances that I mentioned, formulated like as such, each victim has the right to know the truth regarding the circumstances of the enforced disappearance, the progress and results of the investigation, and the fate of the disappeared person, obviously with the focus on disappearances. The OHCHR study that I mentioned goes further because it is not only about disappearances, but more broadly. It says the right to truth involves knowing the full and complete truth as to the events that transpired, their specific circumstances, and who participated in them, including knowing the circumstances in which the violations took place, as well as the reasons for them. So that really goes far. It really means going to the bottom of the facts of heinous crimes and violations of human rights, and not just through criminal investigations, but also other means of establishing the truth. There's an interesting debate and some open question about who are the bearers of this right. I'm not going to go into detail about this. Clearly the victims and their relatives, potentially also society as a whole, and that has been increasingly recognized in the Latin American context by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, for example, but also the UN Working Group on Forced Disappearances, which understands that the right to truth is both a collective and an individual right. The truth has also to be told at the level of society as a vital safeguard against the recurrence of violations. I think that is important to bear in mind, right, the more collective societal dimension of that right. Now, how is the situation in Europe? The European Court of Human Rights, kind of the standard bearer for human rights in the European system, the system of the Council of Europe, has come to the party, you can say, pretty late. The right to truth really only appears since the 2010s in its jurisprudence. But obviously there were precursors in the jurisprudence that had to do especially with the positive obligations flowing from the right to life and the right to be free from torture and inhumane treatment that are recognized in the convention, and for which the court already over the previous 2 decades had developed a strong jurisprudence on positive obligations to punish and persecute perpetrators of rights violations. Now, the right to the truth becomes acknowledged more directly in the jurisprudence from 2011 in a Romanian case that had to do with the death of demonstrators in the late Ceausescu days. And then especially in the extraordinary rendition cases that are about the rendition of terrorist suspects by the CIA to facilities in Eastern Europe, undisclosed facilities in Eastern Europe, and then on to either Guantanamo or back to the Middle East. Obviously secret operations that came to light kind of for the European Court of Human Rights in the El Masri case especially, and then in the Anashini case. And it's in these cases really kind of that the right to truth gains greater strength, where and also kind of the collective dimension. In the early case, in the Al Masri case, a majority of the court points to the right to truth, but there are some judges that still hold out against it. They think, well, the previous jurisprudence around the right to life and the right to be free from torture would be sufficient. The majority goes further than that. That becomes more consolidated than in Al-Nashiri v. Poland, also an extraordinary rendition case, where the court says, where allegations of serious human rights violations are involved in the investigation, the right to the truth regarding the relevant circumstances of the case does not belong solely to the victim of the crime and his or her family, but also to other victims of similar violations and the general public who have the right to know what has happened. So here we can really see a step forward by the court to acknowledge not only the right to truth, but also kind of the collective ownership, you can say, bearership of that right. Now, on that basis, by now very consolidated basis of an establishment of a right to truth and with various facets at the international level, it is pretty clear that what we've heard has happened, and especially what has not happened in response to the attacks in the Rambla in terms of investigation by the Spanish state, falls short of the requirements of international law, kind of both universal international law under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, but also the European Convention on Human Rights. We have heard the various doubts and lacks of clarity that are remaining. The very fact that the attacks on the Rambla haven't been the subject of investigation themselves, but only kind of the membership in a terrorist organization, because the supposed actors, authors of the crime in the Rambla were dead. The fact that there has not been a parliamentary commission of inquiry, and obviously kind of driven by the fact that there are clear indications that somehow the Spanish state was involved in a way that we cannot know more about, simply because the state withholds that information, both because they had a relationship with the Imam Esati, and in a relationship the depth of which we can only surmise to what extent they were actually working with him or in the end surveying him, but obviously kind of a possibility to know what was going on and not doing anything about it. The circumstances of the death of Esati, kind of which Jaume has made this kind of very clear, kind of many doubts remain about kind of what has happened, doubts that can possibly be alleviated in one way or another, but for that one would need a serious inquiry. And obviously that's really the core of the right to truth, right? Without us knowing precisely what is the truth, we have a right to be able to understand what has happened and a right to really go to the bottom of what has happened, from which the Spanish state cannot simply withdraw, and that is especially so for a crime as heinous as a terrorist attack, a major terrorist attack in La Rambla, with many indications that there is an involvement of the state, or at least kind of knowledge, potential knowledge of the state and what has happened. Now, the right to truth, in a sense, kind of makes very serious demands on the Spanish state here, really in two ways. On the one hand, and that has been acknowledged already by the Inter-American Court on Human Rights in its first case, Velázquez Rodriguez in the early 90s, that the state cannot simply say, well, we cannot hold a criminal trial, and as a result of that, we cannot really know. Now, that is not sufficient as an excuse. It is not sufficient as an excuse to say that the perpetrators are dead, for saying, well, no, we don't need to find out what it is. The right to truth goes further than that. It requires that you go to the bottom of it, even if the potential perpetrators are dead, and clearly kind of there are others involved. And it also requires that investigation in cases of an involvement of the Secret Service, which kind of clearly the cases of extraordinary renditions were all about Secret Service action, the ones that were in the European Court of Human Rights. There was all the CIA and secret services of European state, Macedonia, Poland, and others collaborating. So clearly, kind of that's also not a bar to going to the bottom on that. Okay, I'll just a few consequences of what can be done, because obviously, as Jaume said, the Spanish state is not overly willing or interested in doing anything about it, although it's obviously its responsibility and the right to truth, even as a right under international law, kind of has a direct relevance in Spanish law as well, and should bind Spanish state organs as a result of Spanish constitutional law. Now, obviously, kind of there are practical limits to bringing that responsibility to bear. Now, there are other avenues, of course, kind of once these are exhausted, the domestic avenues are exhausted. There are UN bodies. The UN Human Rights Committee is one, which other cases against Spain related to Catalonia have been heard or are pending. Also, for example, the Committee on the Rights of the Child with respect to the children who have been killed or injured. But obviously, the European Court of Human Rights, where we've seen kind of that we now have a significant jurisprudence, and kind of that can be activated once domestic remedies are exhausted. That obviously is the main requirement. But after that, that is an obvious case to be brought there. There would also be the possibility, in theory, that other states take an interest. Prosecutors in other states on the basis of universal jurisdiction or jurisdiction because their own nationals have been injured or killed, as we've heard, kind of many nationalities are affected here. Kind of prosecutors from other countries could say, well, in Spain, there hasn't really been an investigation. Now let's start an investigation. Practically, that's obviously politically difficult, but it is not entirely excluded. And various countries, think of Germany, Italy, the US, or Belgium, have the legal framework that would allow for such action by prosecutors. Clearly, given the failure of Spanish authorities to investigate, it would be something one would hope for, although it is difficult to make happen. All right, I want to finish on that. That really kind of is largely kind of to outline a bit kind of the framework in which we operate here, and also to show that this is not just a Spanish affair, right? It is really an affair that concerns much more broadly the world. Just as obviously Europeans point to other countries about human rights violations, it is only right that other European countries, the European Union, and obviously countries in other parts of the world point to Spain for the failure to investigate something as heinous and such obvious as the attacks in the Rambla. After all, one of the biggest terrorist attacks in Europe in a decade. I end on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Krisch. We open the floor to questions from the audience. No, wait. Mike, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much to all the speakers. It was super interesting. I was just wondering, from what Professor Krisch has said, it seems to me, humbly, that the avenue of universal justice or jurisdiction and the avenue of the UN are they would be great, but I don't see them happening. I think that the avenue of the Strasbourg court is probably more likely. And I was just wondering, what are your plans in that respect? Is the intention to eventually reach the Strasbourg court, and at which stage are you? Thank you.
Yes. Oui, nous voulons finir toutes les instances possibles
Yes, we would like to try to use all legal instances, namely at Strasbourg. But as Nico has just said, we need to open the door to all the possibilities when it comes to investigations. And actually, Strasbourg, if we were to knock on Strasbourg's door, well, they would simply end up saying that Spain would have to proceed to a redo. And on La Rambla, there has not been any investigation, as I have explained, because when the scope was defined, they decided to focus on Canal, and La Rambla was not part of the scope. End of story.
So do I understand correctly that you think that the Strasbourg court then would order Spain to carry out an investigation that Spain
now we have to go to Supreme Court of Spain. We have presented the last record that expect anything.
So the right to truth of the father of Xavier Martinez, would you think there's no chance for him and the rest of us as society to know the truth? I mean, is this so pessimistic, the situation?
So Okay. Not the one to provide false hope. Obviously, it's a really complicated issue, but in a sense, kind of as we've seen, kind of the right to truth emerged from struggle, right? And I think kind of that's what it requires here too, right? It is not simply granted or provided happily by those involved in heinous crimes, but it's something one has to wrest from them and struggle for. And obviously, kind of, sort of one has to go through the motions in the Spanish judicial system. That's clear. One can go to Strasbourg. The main element, I think, is to see this not just as individual litigation, but really as part of a broader campaign of sensitization, of visibilization of the cause, for which it is obviously kind of necessary to activate other elements as well. The media clearly play a significant role in this. There are UN bodies that one can activate, like UN Special Rapporteurs, for example, that if they take an interest can bring at least a certain visibility to the question. They can engage the Spanish government in conversations about what has happened and what has not happened. So there are various ways in which one can mount a campaign that might lead to a greater awareness of the facts, and potentially, if Spain is obviously not willing to pursue that avenue, even if the European Court of Human Rights might order it to do so, right, the possibility that prosecutors in other countries might eventually take an interest and say, well, look, sort of, now let's really push hard here. Now, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but as with any social struggle, it takes time and lots of effort.
Thank you very much.
I want to say something about that. I think it's very important that Nico Krisch said and about the dimension, the society involvement in this right of the truth, and that's think this event exactly is for that. That's the reason for this event exactly to expand this idea and to show in the world here in Brussels, but in many countries, and to go far and for a compromise with the society with this cause and with the right to the truth, but not only for the victims, but because it's a thing that concerns all society, the Catalan society, and think we are here for that.
Yes, my question is for Nico Krisch. Thank you to everyone. Before that, in the same line, would it be possible that a group of persons says to a government of another country, you should investigate, like, for instance, here in Belgium? Could this be possible to say, okay, you should ask Spain to investigate? Could you do that here, from Belgium?
Yes, of course. Now, the difficulty is obviously kind of mobilizing the right people for this, right? So there are two elements involved. One is a diplomatic one about another government trying to get the Spanish government to talk about kind of the investigation, especially those governments whose nationals have been affected, injured or killed, right, obviously have a standing for that. They're not going to bring cases in international courts against Spain for that, but it could be that if one mobilizes them, that they might at least ask questions of the Spanish government about that. Kind of that might be a possibility, but one would need a favorable government. The other element is prosecutors, right? So the politically more independent elements of the state, kind of depending on the constitutional setting. Now they might obviously be brought to take an interest if in a country like Belgium, for example, there were a sufficient number of people of significant visibility and standing who would bring that cause to the attention of the judicial system. It might be that a prosecutor would say, well, okay, so now let's look more closely into whether something can be done. And even the kind of opening of an investigation or a preliminary investigation, something of the sort, would be something that obviously Spain would not like. And kind of one doesn't know what happens as a result, but clearly kind of it would be such steps that would increase pressure and potentially kind of lead to a thorough outcome.
So we are at the heart of Europe. And I have a question because I didn't really get what you said. I would like to know if it is obvious or not that Spain hasn't followed all the leads that existed. So, is it possible to go to court against the Spanish state because they did not respect the fundamental right to justice? Can we here from the heart of Europe do that? So, in principle, yes. But practically speaking, well, let's be honest, the Spanish state has violated fundamental rights so often that the Catalonia does not even want to try this. Thank you. And I will speak French because it is easier for me, or I could speak Catalan, but this might be a tad more difficult, and I was born in Belgium as well, so let's speak French. So my question, after paying tribute to the parents, because I must imagine it has been, I must imagine it is very painful to lose someone in such circumstances. But what's more, when we have a look at how the justice treats this matter, it is even worse. And actually, the pain is inflicted a second time. And for any citizen of a democratic country or a European country, it is a shame. And I think that in Belgium we are in a democracy. I've never ever heard ministers say that you are in a full democracy in Belgium. But anyway, we shouldn't try to look at the glass thinking if it is full or half empty. But I ask myself several questions, and I won't talk about, well, the details, because, well, that's for legal experts, and we know what justice, or rather injustice, looks like in Spain. Anyway, I have a question, and I would like to see things through another lens, because we've carried out an analysis. There are doubts, there are many question marks on all this case. But why? Why does the legal system, the judicial system, not want to proceed to an investigation? This is a question we may also have to ask to European political figures. What's the interest of the judges not to investigate? Why all this unfairness? Why is justice behaving that way? And I have a second question. Are we still in a democracy in Europe? Are we still in a democracy in Spain? Can we still talk about democracy? Why each and every time there is such a targeted case, and one might tag us of being extremists or complotists, people tell us we have to behave in another way? Well, case law in Germany a long time ago talked about the criminal right of the enemies, and Spain went further and created the penal rights of the enemies and of, well, these friends. And actually the Spanish judicial system tries to defend its interest. Agustin and myself, we've reached a conclusion. The drafting of the public prosecutor looked a lot like the drafting and the wording used by secret services, legal advisors and attorneys. This led to many questions, and this is the very first thing we have to say, and this was quite clear on the chemical precursors which were used. Secondly, we have heard what has been said about the conspiracy theories, and the president of the assembly is an amazing legal expert, and the Commissioner Villarejo, which you know here in the room.
L'expression des services secrets contre espagnol.
And I am deeply sorry, but I don't know how to say that in French, says the speaker, and so it is quite difficult for the interpreter, says the interpreter. This commissioner said many things about Catalonia, and he said that actually Spain wanted to make Catalonia afraid. And Villarejos was accused of being a liar. He's a compulsive liar, but this doesn't mean that everything he says is a lie. Sometimes he can tell the truth. And so there are possibilities. It is possible that the Spanish state knew something would happen and, well, didn't take action. It might also be possible that the Spanish state wanted to have a pseudo-terrorist attack and to counter-strike it, but in the end, well, the terrorist attack truly happened. You know, there are 4 levels of alert for terrorism throughout Europe. And here, actually, we could have reached level 5. And then, well, military would have taken action and be deployed. All of this obviously is abstract, and we are talking about theories. But the justice in Spain wanted to put aside all these conspiracy theories, or theories considered as being conspirationists. So why does the Spanish state not proceed with a correct investigation? This is a very tricky question. Everyone knows that justice tends to be represented by a woman who has banded eyes. But in Spain, justice is blind because it is looking at the sun, not because it is blindfolded. Why? Well, because a dictatorship hasn't ended yet over there. I also wanted to add something. I wanted to say that over that summer in 2017, we were fighting for the independence of Catalonia, and actions had been undertaken by the Spanish state to tamper the urns so that the referendum wouldn't take place, so that many other things would happen. The Generalitat was also afflicted by economic decisions taken by the Spanish state, everything to make it difficult for us to decide on our faith. And so in August, we knew that September would be difficult if we wanted to fight for independence in October. And the Spanish state was ready to intervene. And that's when, well, the terrorist attacks happened in La Rambla. I don't know if this was America, if this was random or something different. We don't know what it is. And that's why there are so many doubts, why we have these conspiracy theories. A minister said that something would happen in August in Catalonia. What did he mean? Did he know something? Did they decide not to take action, to not avoid something? Did they know, but did they not know enough to avoid things? Didn't they know it would be so serious? And Catalonia, as I have said, was very lively and fighting for independence. And so we need to investigate, and that's why we are here today, because in the end, it's a state at the heart of Europe where we still have doubts and fears, and where, well, we fear that a state let a terrorist attack happen. And this is very, very serious. We're not sure about this, but there are so many leads, so many data which make us think that it is a possibility. Hence, our quest for truth. But you are legal experts, and in the end, you've always studied this. You want to know the truth. The highest courts at the international level should already have seized this case. If this had happened in Brussels or Paris, things would have been very different, I think. Barcelona is not that important. Is a foreigner in Barcelona or a citizen from Barcelona less important? Do we lack rights in Barcelona? That's a question I ask myself. Because in the end, Belgium didn't react that much. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Cañas.
Peut-être sur ça. Donc, je crois qu'on...
Well, I think
with a mic anyway, even in English. Good. Obviously, one would hope that prosecutors and judges are independent from political pressure, but we all know from however many empirical studies that they are not, right? That is the real exception that they are independent. So in a sense, Spain in that case proves the rule, although obviously it is outside of the normality that Europe has tried to create. But this is something that outside of Spain, very few people really recognize. There's at least from my impression, and we've had these cases in the UN Human Rights Committee and talking to people in Geneva, there's a strong sense that Spain has been a successful case of a transition to democracy, and that it is a liberal state. It has a rule of law, it has a separation of powers, everything as you want it. Now, maybe there's some problems with ETA. Well, maybe they've gone a bit overboard, but well, okay, you understand. Maybe there's some problems with the Catalans. Obviously, well, yeah, 1st of October was excessive, but there's still a general sense that in principle Spain is okay and belongs in Europe. And I think it is a really an uphill battle to make people understand that there are systemic deficiencies in the rule of law in Spain that have to do obviously with the Catalan situation, but they have to do with all kinds of more fundamental opponents to the Spanish political class, right? Sort of critics. We've seen we see people in exile for the rapping things that elsewhere in Europe one would have said, well, it's just a rap, right? But no, in Spain they get prosecuted, so there's a serious problem of freedom of expression in Spain. Amnesty International has said this for a long time. There's a serious problem with the independence of the judiciary. The Council of Europe has said this for a long time, but for the general population, the media and the political discourse to accept that takes still kind of a lot. And I think kind of that's something one has to push on. One has to really show on, so kind of exhibit the cases systematically in which there has been a violation of human rights, bring as many as possible to the UN, to the European Court of Human Rights, to the Council of Europe, so that one can build a picture of a systematic form of violation, of discrimination, of lack in the human rights situation, and possibly then one can get more people to listen. But it's a really, real difficulty. As you say, kind of, it should make one suspicious if a country speaks of itself as a full democracy, or if they mount, as the foreign ministry has tried to, kind of a whole commercial campaign about kind of showing Spain as a democracy, right? So if you need to talk about it, maybe you have a problem, right? But kind of so, but it is clear kind of that that Spain is pretty effective in still kind of bringing that issue to the people.
Tu disais avant pourquoi non, sur les procureurs.
Well, earlier we were talking about the activities of the Attorney General, and we were there on the first day, and we talked with the people of government, and suddenly we had one hypothesis, but we were focused on the emergency situation, but from the very first beginning, from the very first moment, from the very beginning, we thought there was something curious. We thought the reaction of the Attorney General, we thought that the reaction of Mariano Rajoy were very weird. Mariano Rajoy didn't take the floor until very late at night. We were called in a very weird manner, and the behavior of these people was quite weird. And so we said, well, is the Spanish government hiding something? This is something we asked ourselves on the very first day. So what was the problem? What was the issue at hand? Well, actually, the whole behavior of the state, of the Spanish state, of all the national bodies were weird. And all these behaviors just confirmed our hypothesis. All the problems explained by Jacques just confirmed our hypothesis, a hypothesis we didn't want to believe in, because, well, obviously who wants to believe in such a hypothesis? But we have duties and responsibilities, and we followed the experts, the legal experts, the lawyers, the investigators, police forces. And indeed, it is clear the situation is still blurry and there are still question marks. But from the very first second, we thought that something was wrong when we talked with the Spanish state.
I would also like to ask a question. Most of us here are convinced Europeans, and for us it's unimaginable that in Europe in the 21st century a massive terror attack remains not investigated. It's a major European scandal, and this is also why we are here today. And I hope we have also public events in all the countries where victims come from, and they were more than 300 injured people. So most countries on earth. In August in Catalonia, it's full of tourists. So. How can Europe, we always make even a little bit of fun in Catalonia. Europe will not allow that. Europe will not allow that. And Europe is allowing a lot of injustice against Catalans. But Europe really cannot allow having a black hole of security in the core of Europe, where terror attacks may happen, organized by or tolerated by Secret Service, where a minority is spied upon massively with Pegasus. So this is all going to arrive at some boiling point at some point where Europe says, we don't like Catalan independence. We don't like these unruly Catalans. But we cannot risk European security. We cannot risk the fundamental rights covered by privacy laws. So, how can we get Europe to stop being so short-sighted and realize what is at stake here? What can we do about that?
Mais je réponds en français. Je crois que
I will answer in French, but Nico will know what to answer, and actually he has already answered. The thing is that people think that the Spanish state abides by law, but as a consequence, whenever you put into question, well, the decisions of a high court of a European state, well, you go against mainstream thinking. It goes against mainstream thinking, and this is why I think it is more useful to gather the different stakeholders, and why we need to work with lawyers, and we need to work on all the levels of the judicial system in Spain. To begin with, we need to find victims from people in Italy and abroad, and we need to try to see if we can do something else. We can also think about universal jurisdiction. We know that Belgium and Germany are pathways we might have to explore, but we need to work with the special rapporteur of the UN, because an attorney general of a given country might not be legitimate enough to tackle such a file, and they might be more legitimate if there is support from, for example, a UN special rapporteur. Furthermore, we need to work with media. Netflix does something amazing, and actually we need more Netflix. We need sponsors. We need to find philanthropists, and sometimes you are able to find money for given projects, and well, we need to find money for a project to make this issue more visible to the public, to raise awareness amongst the general public on this quest for justice and the unfairness of the Spanish state, in order to make behaviors evolve. I just wanted to take the floor to actually say what Tony just said. And let me answer to you. When criminal law of a friend or a foe is applied in Spain, well, it is applied, and for the rest of the world it is quite difficult to understand what is happening on the ground. And when we react to the application of this law, we are qualified, we are called conspirationists. Producing a documentary might be interesting, and this might help raise awareness amongst European citizens, because this is outrageous and we cannot remain mute.
That I think we are just in a moment that the cases is ongoing now in the Spanish system, in the judicial system of Spain. We are not exhausting right now all the judiciary system in Spain. Now we have to go to the Supreme Court and then to the Constitutional Court in Spain, and that's ongoing. That's no finish in Spain, and it provides a new path, a new others resolution, and new other sentences, and a new other opportunities to inquire that. For sure, there will not be good for us, because in Spain there's no justice for that, I think. But yes, occasions to spread out some other campaigns and some other events and some other public events and media occasions, and I think there will be many occasions to make this, and even for other victims in other countries, these countries in Germany, even here in Belgium, and in Italy, in France, and perhaps I don't know, I think in Argentina too, there was a victim, in Canada, and there's many countries, there's opportunity to make this.
Nous avons déjà parlé avec des avocats de ces pays, mais il est
talked
difficile.
with lawyers of these countries, but the Spanish system, it's what it is, and I would have to proceed to another lecture to give you more explanations.
If there are no more questions, we will thank all the participants and also thank you for having come. And we are now going to dinner together.